Hi everyone, I'm Nicole and welcome to my channel, and we're going to be making an owl bear from D&D. I don't play, but I love the design. I was inspired to do this after I made a skeleton and the vertebrae looks suspiciously like an owl. I also saw these AI generated owl images and went, oh, no thank you. Me a human, I can do that better. I started off with a foil armature that looks a little bit like a potato or a chicken tender, while also losing my mind over the fact that my glue gun would not stay upright. Now we can add some clay. I'm using Cutest clay extra firm, which is quickly becoming my favorite go-to clay. Now I could use a pasta machine to make this into a beautiful even piece of clay, but my fingers work just as well. Then I slap it onto my foil, making sure to get out any air pockets. Now I have some air pocket trauma, so I'm going to add a little safety hole that I jam through the bottom, making sure to go through the clay to the tinfoil, that way any air can escape and not explode my piece. It doesn't actually explode, but it can cause cracks, and then I get sad, and then I get mad. Now we're going to add a little fur coat to our little chicken tender. It does look like the little chicken tenders toys that McDonald's used to hand out way back in the day. You youths aren't going to know what I'm talking about, but us older folks, you know what I'm talking about. This is going to be the fur that bunches up around our little owl bear's neck. And I want it so fluffy. I want him so chubby and so fluffy. So I make it go around the front, and then I want a little tail in the back to give it some shape. And you know we're going to add buns. I'm famous for it, and I'm good at it, but these are a little too three-dimensional. So we're going to shape them out and blend them in. Now the beginning stages are all about just blocking in your basic shapes, and then you can work on detail. So that's what we're working on first. But of course, I was like, this is not fluffy enough. We need more fluff. And we need some arms, some wings, arms and paws. Palms. All right, we're going to make some palms, and they're going to have a little paw, but also a little bit of a wing shape. And you can do whatever shape you want here. You just want to make sure they're at least cousins, if not twins, in the shape department. Anytime I'm adding a new piece onto my body, I like to really look at the position and move the figure around and look at it from different angles and make sure they're in the correct spot. I add some lines onto our paws, and they're looking much more like paws and less like blobs. For the legs, I block them out the same way. I use two pieces, one for the feet. Getting them to match is always a nightmare. They're close enough. Stick those on there, and then I can add the thighs. Everything looks a little blocky and weird during this process, but I promise you, it's all about shaping and blending. I had some gaps after adding the thighs, and I simply filled those with clay and started blending the legs all together. One thing I like to do during this process is hold the figure up and really look at it. That way you can tell if you have anything that's uneven, like these thighs. One is much juicier than the other, so we're going to even them out. And as I started blending things together, I was like, you know what? We need even more fluff. So yes, I added even more clay to the fluffy part to make it even more fluffy. I have zero regrets. I'm not going to lie, it had been 2 months since I had sculpted anything before this, and I was very nervous. I felt like I had forgotten how to do art, and I was really scared about doing it. I was like, this is not going to look good. But then I just realized that even if you're afraid or don't know what the heck you're doing, you just gotta try. And this was a great example of that. I just went for it, and it all came together, and it felt so good. You're gonna need to adapt and change certain parts, and I was realizing that my head was too small, so I started bulking it out. I just kind of go with my gut on this until it looks right. Just know you can always take away clay or add it later. I use the same technique that I actually used to make my little vertebrae, making this little pyramid shape. It makes the perfect little owl shape. And I slapped it on the front, and I was like, okay, now we're getting into the owl process. First off, I am so sorry about the jump in progress. I was kind of just messing around and it worked out, and of course I didn't have my camera on, and I'm so sorry about that. But I kind of just poked my tool in there to make a little beak and mouth, and I needed to add more clay to the beak shape. Man, I will do anything but stay in frame, I swear. I took little bits of clay and just started adding it to the beak and really shaping it out. I reshaped the mouth a little bit and gave it a little bit of a curve up so that it looked like he was a happy boy. I added some trial eyes that I made to the face to just help me imagine more what I was going for, and it really helped. I want to smooth out all of the lines. Flat lines just they look amateur. You want to round everything out and shape it so that it looks like a real little creature. The top needed to be more rounded, so I added more clay and I was like, oh yeah, this is way cute. For the eyes, I'm using some half sphere glass cabochons. I'm using the 12mm. I'm using a similar technique to what I used to use when I made my fairy fluff art dolls way back in the day. For this, I want to make sure the back of the cabochons are clean and don't have any oils or anything on them using my shirt because I'm classy like that. Now the technique is very simple, so nothing should go wrong, right? Ooh, foreshadowing here. I used the same technique I used on my Baba Yaga hut for the chicken eye, just painting the black pupil and then painting whatever color you want around that. I did forget that the glass will magnify any pupils you make, and that's how I ended up with some that are too huge. I made so many mainly because it is so hard to get two eyes that look the same, but it also let me do a little eyeball try-on haul to figure out what kind of personality and eye shape I wanted for this little guy. I wanted my eyes to face front, so after I figured out which ones I wanted, I started using my fingers to kind of push the clay down so that the eyes faced forward. Once I had the eyeballs in place, it left a small gap on the outer rings of the eyes that I just filled in with clay. For the eyelids, I totally just wung it, and I'm glad I did. It made the face so much more expressive, so I highly recommend experimenting with this because I feel like it really ties in the face and it can really change the expression you're going for. I wanted that derpy, wide-eyed, super cute expression, and these little lashes / eyelids did the trick. To give this little guy some big personality, I went for some big eyebrows. I'm talking some honkin' eyebrows that are super adorable. Cutting off this clay really helped me blend it into the face. It fit almost perfectly. Now, I do not really plan out my figures. I usually just wing it as I go. So I allowed myself time to just set it down and look at it, or even walk away and do something else and think on it before I move to the next step. It's totally okay if you don't know what you're doing. Sometimes you just need a little bit of a pause to think it through, or try something out and see if it works. Like this, I eventually knew the face needed something, so I added these feathers, and I was like, yeah, this is not it. So I started blending them all together, and I was like, what are we doing? We don't know. So then I was like, this needs to be fur. We're gonna do fur, and then I kind of pointed it up, then I pointed it down, and then I went somewhere in the middle in the end. Owlbears kind of have two ways to go with the ears. They either do the owl ear or the bear ear, and I knew I wanted to do the bear ear, and I feel like it added so much to the cuteness level. I got two little ears that looked roughly the same, and of course, it's all about the blending. Dotting tools are the perfect tool to make little ear holes, and here I'm using it to make not only the ear hole, but some cool little texture on the outside of the ear as well. My ears are taking shape, but we want to move on to the paws, and this is important. We're taking the lines that we drew earlier and making it into an actual paw. Lines are one-dimensional. You want to round out your little toe beans, and this is what's going to give them shape. It's all about shape. If you're just doing straight lines, it's boring. You got to add shape that's going to give it the realism and make it look really good. After adding that to the feet, we can move on to the beans. And some cute little toe beans are going to take this cuteness up to the next level. Here, I'm not going for bear or owl, I'm just doing what I think looks good. And I'm using my little balls of clay, giving them a little bit of a roll to shape them out, and smooshing them onto the foot. Now here you can see one side's unblended, and on the other side I blended in everything, and you can choose which side you like. I was having a gummy bear break, as one does, and Jenny came over to remind me that she is obsessed with gummy bears and I better give her one or she will be so sad, and who can resist that sweet face. Okay, enough of this cuteness, we need to get to the other cuteness, and that is making little feathers for our little owl bear. I made a little gradient of my clay pieces so it would be easy to make the feathers the same size. I went from smaller to medium to large to smaller again, just making this very simple shape, pushing it in and putting it at the angle I want it to go. I just checked both sides to make sure they were even, then I could start blending them into the owlbear paw area thing. And with some shaping, those little balls of clay look pretty awesome, don't they? Now when it comes to furring, you can do it a million ways with a different type of tool, and I tried every single one. So you just do whatever works for you. This is what I tried on the face. I switched to something later. Then I was like, the eyebrow needs more. So I added this little swoop-de-doo. I don't know what it is, but it looks good. And that's what art is about. Do whatever you want and make it look good. Now I'm fairies and fancy, so I make things fancy. And these eyebrows were looking a little too bland, a little too boring. So we added the little line. What is it? No one knows. Now for our little fur fluff. We built it up and now we get to shape it out. And the only thing better than fluff is adding even more fluff. Yes, butt fluff. You heard me. Start building it up. We gotta build it up. We gotta smooth it out. And we gotta start pinching it. Because we want the fur to actually look like fur. Because yes, this is fantasy, but the realism just makes it more believable. So pinch it. Then we want to start parting it and adding the texture of the actual hair. Oh, I was kidding. We need to add even more to the legs. We're going to do it to the front too. I want 360 degrees of fluff. I'm going to be using the same process all the way around the edge of the bear. We just want to start adding fur in the direction that the fur would actually go. The best way, if you don't know how that's going to work, is to look at other furry animals and look at how their hair flows. But here, I'm winging it. And you can wing it too. Look at that. Now that's amazing. That's fluff. And now we got to add some to the front. I start shaping up that back fluff and you can see why I added the point. It adds so much interest to the back and it just follows the shape really nicely. But we need to carve it out a little bit so it's not two-dimensional and you can see how big of a difference that makes. Now you're going to be like, what's going on here? Why are we razor blading over here? I want the cheeks to look so fluffy that the fur like separates in chunks. If you know, you know. And it's important because it's so fluffy, there's like little breaks in the fur. So that's what I'm doing here. Look, I really get lost in the fur, you guys. I'm just lost in it. So we're going to add even more. This time we're going for that soft little baby fur. And I do that all over the face. I pick a direction and I stick with it, making sure that the hair is flowing into the right directions and flowing all together. I used a more subtle texture here for our fancy eyebrows. And I was like, okay, we need to add in some feather elements here. They look kind of like tiny leaves, but don't worry, they will evolve into feathers. A little bit of detail always does it. I just realized how much making leaves and feathers is like almost identical. Anyway, focus, Nicole. Sorry, I'm unhinged in this video, I'm just excited. More fur. I'm making it flow naturally, picking a direction and going with it. Here, I do a different one on the ear for fun. But everything flows into each other and looks really natural. One thing I figured out to do that really helped was getting in all the really hard to reach small areas first and leaving some areas blank so that I could hold it with my hand without smashing the detail. Then I worked kind of from the inside out. I also sketched some areas to figure out where I wanted the fur to flow and then just went through and detailed it and made it deeper. And yes, this was very tedious and took me a very long time, but you can see what a difference it makes. It just comes to life. And it is so fun. I really had fun doing the back hairs and the way I made them. It's a little Chewbacca going. I love it. And this is where I made things harder for myself than I should have. I should have detailed those feathers before I added on that second layer of feathers. You can see I did a slightly different shape just to add some variation, but man, it was hard to detail those bottom ones after. So do it the smart way and not the dumb way like I did it. I blend them in and then I shape them out and oh, I love how this came out. Now for the fun part, which is detailing. This part would have been a lot more fun if I had done it the correct way and one layer at a time, but we figured it out and we did it and it looks amazing. Just remember, take your time, make everything flow in the same direction and it'll all turn out all right. I needed a better transition between the feathers and the body, and that's where more tiny pieces of fur came into play. I blended them in really nicely and just detailed them enough so they look like they were just part of the arm. Some swoopy fur goodness right here. Now, of course, to highlight this amazing furry little booty, we need to put the cutest little bear tail on the back. It got to a point with detailing that I had to put it on my stand and just sculpt it as is. It got to a point where I couldn't pick it up anymore without damaging the detail. And that's always a tricky part of sculpting, but you just gotta work around it and do your best. I tried like 10 different combinations of feathers on his head until I got the one that I liked, and then I could finally be at peace with this face. I then suddenly realized that owls have nostrils. Actually, bears do too, so I should probably give him some. I added just a tiny bit more detail to the fluff, but not enough to blend in with the rest of the body fur. Then I could use my secret weapon. This stuff is like a magic blender with a paintbrush. So I just paint it on there really nicely and smooth everything out, get rid of all the crumblies and all the fingerprints. And this is where my confidence is sky high. Nothing can go wrong, right? Not on my channel. Wrong. We messed up the eyeballs. During baking, the paint delaminated from the glass eye. Luckily with cosplay, I just popped that sucker out with minimal damage. And then I could just pop new ones in. So it's kind of unlucky, but also lucky. Thank you, cosplay. I used some alcohol to get rid of the old paint. I think that maybe the paint wasn't dry when I baked it and that's what caused the issue. I don't know. But I sanded the cabochons this time, but I knew since I wasn't baking them, I probably wouldn't have a problem. I spent 14 years making a new set of eyes that actually matched, and I put them in and it's like it never happened. Magic. Dun dun. Glass eyes always give me drama. Jeez. But now we can prime. I like using a dark primer because I'm going to be using dark paints, and then I use white if I'm using bright colors. One thing I love about airbrushing is you can be bad at it and it will still look good. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's how I've gotten this far. Fake it till you make it, and maybe you'll never make it, and that's okay because art doesn't have to be perfect. I really wanted some parts to pop, important parts, like the booty. So I used a lighter color for that in the face, and it gave it a nice contrast to all the brown I had going on. I think I used 3 different types of brown here. No worries if you don't have an airbrush. I would just recommend doing the dry brush method and really just blending colors together, and it would look probably just as good. One reason I love doing fantasy art is because I'm a big fan of doing whatever the heck I want. And when it comes to fantasy, you can kind of just do whatever you want. You're not limited by what's realistic, and you can just really go for it. When it comes to airbrushing, I'm not so good at the details, which means I'm gonna need to go back in and paint over some of my overspray, which is pretty normal for airbrushing. I may just have a little bit more to paint than others. I'm using the same paint that I thinned to use my airbrush, and it works really well. The only thing is I had to add more layers because it's a very thinned out paint, but I feel like it was much easier to work with and I could just layer it and it was really smooth. So I do recommend watering down your paints a little bit if you want it to be really smooth and lay really nicely. If you're using thicker paint, it can be really hard not to get brush strokes or big clumps. This caramel brown color was great for highlighting areas so that all the browns didn't just run together. I've been trying to think of a name for this guy, but I'm drawing a total blank. So I'll leave it to you guys to come up with some options for a name for this little guy. I mixed some black with some brown to get this very deep brown color, and I use that to highlight these adorable little beans because they need to be seen. I use that same color for the beak as well, along for around the eyes. The key to using thinned out paints is just doing multiple thin layers. It really makes the difference. My favorite part is always the eye reveal. And of course, we need some eyeliner going on here. I looked at references of owls to figure out what kind of patterns were going on in the owl world. And there was a lot of spots, and I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. We went with some nice little stripes and a little chevron pattern, because this is about having fun and not crying. To accentuate all of our lovely fur texture, I watered down some dark brown paint even more and painted it in most of the lines, just in the larger ones that I wanted to define. I just want to thank all of my subs who stuck around while I was on hiatus, moving into my new home, which I love. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you to everybody who's joined the community since I've been on break. And I really hope you guys enjoy this new video, and I can't wait to make the next one.